This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good morning, everybody. Keith Engel for TGI Sports Talk on the Northeast Streaming Sports Network. It's great to have you here with me today. It's a little bit dreary here in upstate New York, East Greenbush. We are, remember, the only, I keep saying that, I hope it's true, the only live streaming webcast here in East Greenbush, New York. I know we're the first, and we have a blast being with you every Friday. I want to, and Sunday, and Wednesday, and my may have getting tired of me. I'm not sure. I hope not. The followers and the viewers say not. Just a reminder, all the groups I share this to, if you get it, I guarantee you're going to have some great relevant content. So I thank you for letting me do that. All the followers, please like and share the show. It only helps me. It helps my guests. If they are in fact looking to have their information shared, which I know my guest today, Skip Hall, is, which we'll talk about in a second. So again, I want to thank my guests from last week, Ken Schott from the Daily Gazette. We went over the NFL football season to great reception. Ken's a good guy that has his own podcast called Parting Shots. So make sure you check that out. And we had a great show on Wednesday night with the College Football Huddle. Mark Mancini from Mancini Media joined me. I've had a tough go of it as far as some of my predictions so far, but it's been an interesting season, and I'm sure it will be as we go forward. My guest today is Skip Hall. Skip was a long time college football coach, over 26 years. Spent time coaching with some great names in the world of college football. No one bigger than obviously Nick Saban. He coached under Don James at Washington, another great name in the annals of college football coaching. He actually was a head coach at Boise State before Boise went 1A, Division 1A, which I guess we call FBS today. The NCAA likes to change those designations around, so keep us all confused, I think. But Skip also has a new book out that we will talk about as we go forward today. Let's see if I can pull it up real quick. I had it shared. No, I didn't add it. Okay. It's called Coach 'Em Up. The Skip Hall story, how the power of influence and encouragement changes lives. So we're going to be talking to Skip about his career and the world of college football today, and we'll also obviously going to talk more about this topic as well. But with no further ado, let's bring in Mr. Skip Hall. Coach, how are you today?
Good morning, Keith. I'm doing great. Great to be with you.
First thing I guess I got to know is, I don't know if I need to apologize for calling you coach, because I've read some interviews recently where you were referred to as Dr. Skip Hall. Should I be calling you?
No, I'm not a doctor. I mean, I have a master's degree and all that, but coach is a more appropriate.
All right. Fair enough. We'll stick with Coach Hall. I like that better. And but congratulations on that master. We'll talk about the book, and we'll kind of circle back around, I think, to both things. I mean, I haven't had a chance to read the book. I do have kind of I don't know what to call the version, like a PDF version, and I've looked through it enough to know that it's a lot. There's a lot in football, and I've always thought this anyway, and in sports, that doesn't just translate to sports, but into life in general, whether you're in business, sales, whatever it might be, or just your everyday life. And I have a feeling as I dive more into this book, it's going to talk more about that. Is that in fact the case? Would you say, Coach?
Yes, absolutely, Keith. The principles that you learn in football and other sports too are so much of a carryover into the business world, and the same things that help you build a great football program help you build a great business too. So there's a lot of parallels.
Excellent. And we'll get, like I said, here's the book cover again, and I'll share this information a few times during the broadcast, and we'll circle back to that obviously. But let's get started where Coach Skip Hall got to the point where he could write this book. What got Skip Hall into coaching in the first place?
Well, I played, of course, high school and college football, and I just knew by the time I got into my junior year of high school that when I couldn't play anymore, I wanted to be a coach. My high school coach was my inspiration. He was my role model. I figured if I could be like Coach Charlie and make $8,000 a year, I'd have it made. But so when I graduated from college, I knew right away I was going to go into coaching. Was fortunate enough to get a head coaching job at a high school in Minnesota, where we are from, my wife and I. And amazingly, we went 23-1 in 3 years.
Wow.
And that got me excited about moving into the next level of college coaching. But that's how I got into it.
And as far as moving up, I mean, in 1971, you become an assistant at Kent State, I believe, for Don James there, right?
Yeah.
Got to start.
Yeah. Don James and I were together for 18 years at 3 different schools. But yeah, 1971 was the first year at Kent State. My first year as a full-time college coach. I'd been a graduate assistant at Colorado for 2 years, but okay. Don James says, I want you to come with me. So away we went. And, on the team at that point was Nick Saban and Jack Lambert, a couple of pretty good players.
Nick was playing it.
Yeah. But anyway, it was a rough start the first year. We were last in the conference the first season. The next season, we won the conference. So go figure.
Well, you can never figure in sports. That's why we got to play the games, right? Because
yep.
A lot of times we look good or we look bad on paper, and it doesn't work out that way. I mean, what was it like? So, at Kent State, you're coaching, obviously, as I said, for Don James, who was, people today may not remember Don James, but they should, because he was a great coach in college football for a long, long time. And I remember being a younger person and enjoying following that Washington team in the Pac. Might have been the Pac-8 or Pac-10, I guess, at the time.
Yes.
But at Kent State, you're with Don James. You have Nick Saban as a player, and I think Nick Saban may have started coaching at Kent State as well, right? What was it like? Did you think? Let's talk about Coach Saban for a second. I know Coach Saban wrote the foreword to your book as well, which it has to be a very important thing for you.
Yes.
What was your relationship with Nick then? And did you see in a young Nick Saban 50 years ago that this guy was going to become the coach and an icon that he has become?
Well, first of all, Nick wasn't a real big player. He wasn't a real fast player, but he was a real smart player and a real competitive player. And you could tell that Nick demanded excellence of himself, and he shared that around with the other players. And so he had some of the makings right off the bat of knowing how to become a great player and a good leader. And so he played 2 years for us, and then he coached for 2 years. And he and I coached together for 2 years. I was on the offensive side. He was on the defensive side. But in the book, in the foreword that Nick wrote, you were talking about Don James.
Yeah.
Nick writes that Coach James was one of the best, if not the best, college football coach ever.
Really?
And I know that Sports Illustrated one year when we were there, we were in Washington for 12 years. I was, but he was there for 18. But Sports Illustrated ranked the top 3 college coaches in the nation. Number 1, Don James. Number 2, Don James. Number 3, Don James. So obviously he made an impact around the country.
Well, when he gets to Washington, I mean, or you guys, I guess, get to Washington, including Don James, obviously, wasn't a big name school for football. I mean, they've been to the Rose Bowl, I guess, 15 years before that, or maybe before.
Yeah, it was in the 60s, yeah.
Yeah, he turned that program around and had some really good teams in a very competitive conference, and obviously with USC being very good at that point and UCLA. What was the key to turning that program around, do you think, for you guys as a staff? Well,
number 1, Don James hired really good assistants. he hired quality guys of character that really wanted to get out and beat the bushes and find the talent that we wanted and build the culture that we wanted. But recruiting is really the key. People ask, well, recruiting, what's the key to recruiting? Well, it's not just recruiting, it's the evaluation process in recruiting.
Yeah.
How do you go about evaluating your players to make sure that you've covered all the bases? And you don't want to bring in, he used to tell us, the assistants, this: I don't mind if we miss on a player and he goes somewhere else, but don't bring a player in that can't play. So that was the key. We wanted to make sure the guys that we brought in, we had fit our culture and had a chance to become a really good player. In fact, that first year, Keith, we beat both SC and UCLA, which was amazing in itself.
That is amazing. That's awesome. I mean, you talk about bringing in great players. You bring in guys like Warren Moon. Obviously, that's going to have a positive effect on your program. What was Warren like at that point in his career? And did you see great things for him? Obviously, he became a great NFL quarterback after having to spend time in Canada.
Yes, well, Warren was a unique guy. He came in out of junior college in California, and not redshirted, but he kind of was a backup player his first year. But he really struggled his first year as a starter, his junior year, and people were just upset, and they were booing him. I mean, it was really, really bad. But Warren, because of the character of the man, he hung in there. He kept working. Coach James kept meeting with him and encouraging him and told him he was going to stick with him. He wasn't going to make a change. And lo and behold, senior year, Warren led us to the championship. Yeah. And then we beat Michigan in the Rose Bowl. And we were 14-point underdogs, which is huge. But Warren was a great competitor as well. And I think that's the thing that you really pick up on guys that become successful. They're great competitors. They're great leaders. They're good athletes, good players, but boy, that competitive nature and that leadership is really important.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember that Rose Bowl so well, to be honest with you. I think it's where I really kind of latched on a little bit to. I didn't know the football. I was 18 years old. I didn't know Pac-10 football that way here in East. You didn't have ESPN. You didn't have all this coverage that we have today that you can find out about all the conferences. And I'd never seen Moon play before that day. And what a great game that was.
Yes. We that was a big win and kind of set us on a course over the next bowl games the next 10 years, with including 3 Rose Bowls, the Orange Bowl in '85. We beat Oklahoma, and we were right at the top. It was BYU or Washington for the national champion, and because BYU, we had lost one game and they had not lost any, so they gave them the nod. But I think if we'd have played BYU that year, I think it would have been in our favor.
Was as you've gone through now, being with Don James and Nick Saban, I mean, as your career is building, I mean, is Don James the biggest influence on your coaching career, or is there somebody else that you would point to as also getting Skip Hall to the point where he might have been ready for a head coaching job somewhere else?
Well, as I mentioned, it started off with my high school coach, Coach Charlie, but he lit the fire. But Don James was my mentor. I mean, I learned so much from him in 18 years, and I eventually became his assistant head coach.
Yeah.
For 2 years before I moved into the head job at Boise State. But yeah, Don was meticulous, a tremendous organizer, a disciplinarian in a good way. Yeah, he had a plan for everything. There was nothing left undone. And the players knew what was expected. The coaches knew what was expected. He didn't have to yell and scream or holler. He just gave you the look. If you got the look, you knew you better shape up.
You can't hear me, probably.
Yeah, I got you. I got you.
I was trying to test something. Somebody said we were having some audio problems. I put myself on mute for a second. Why do you think he is so? I don't want to say forgotten because that's why so underrated as a head coach? You know, within coaching circles and the football world, but outside the general public, is it because we didn't have the proliferation of information that we have today that he's kind of aside in great coaching conversations?
Well, Don was very humble. He was a very humble man, and he didn't seek the limelight at all. And I know one thing that might define him a little bit is every week when we'd be playing, we'd have a game plan, and at the top of his game plan, he would always write, "Give credit, take blame," and that's just kind of how he was. And I think people respected him so much because of his humility. He was great at what he did, but he didn't seek the limelight. He just he let his players and his assistant coaches kind of take care of that.
Excellent. Listen, as you guys go through, you have great success. Obviously, you go to bowl games nearly every year. A couple of Rose Bowls, an Orange Bowl, competing for national championships, which probably wasn't something Washington fans were used to. When did Skip Hall start to get the urge to say, "I need to do this and be the head guy"? At what point did you start thinking about that?
Well, after being with Don for about 14 years, and right before I became the assistant head coach at Washington, I had some opportunities to interview. In fact, when I was only 35, I was a finalist for the Oregon State job, and almost got that, and was also a finalist for the Minnesota job. But you get the itch. I think after you've been there for a while, you have learned what you need to learn, and you're ready to start your own program. You just need a good place to launch, and obviously that was Boise State for me. They had just laid down that blue turf, which was interesting. And then all the sports writers would ask me, "What do you think of the blue field?" I would say, "Well, it's the same length, it's the same width. I guess it'll do." Finally, they kept after it, and I asked my wife. I said, "Well, what do you think? What about the blue turf?" And she says, "Well, it matches your eyes. You're going to look good standing on the sideline." Well, that kind of shut them up.
Well, that's a great line, actually, and it's perfect. Yeah. I mean, so you get your head coaching job at Boise State, and they hadn't moved to 1A or what we know as FBS today.
It was one double A at the time.
Yeah, I mean, were you okay taking it? And again, I hate to say step backwards because you are becoming a head coach, obviously. But
right.
What about moving down from 1A?
Well, Boise was a special place. The pro scouts that always would come through Washington, of course, talking about the players, and they would tell me, they said, "Now look, if that job at Boise State opens up, you better take a good look at that because it's a special place." And so that kind of set my mind in motion. And when that job did open up in, that would have been 87. First year would have been 87. We took a good look at it. My wife and I flew down and interviewed, and they offered us the job before we left. But I needed to go home and talk to my son, who was a sophomore in high school, and he was the tough one. Our daughter was already in college, and she was fine, but our son was a sophomore in high school, and he was the starting quarterback and basketball player and a great golfer. And so we sat down with him, and the quality young man he is. He said, "Well, I got to roll with it." So we went to Boise, and he became, in high school, he had a great career as a quarterback and basketball player and a two-time state champion in golf. And so the transition, I think sports gives young people a great opportunity to, handle the transition, leaving friends and stuff from one place and moving to another. It's a great conduit.
Oh, sports, sports in the right context. I mean, we'll jump off topic just a little bit here now since you brought that up. And your book, I know, covers a lot of this stuff. But sports in my life has taught me so many life lessons. I mean, I hate the fact that we don't keep score in kids' games and stuff because I think learning how to lose is important than learning how to win in life.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Right. But
It is.
if sports can still be that today, if you remove all the nonsense that goes on around it, it's still at its heart teaches a lot of great life lessons that you just referred to, and I know you referred to in your book a little bit. So I did. What influenced your philosophy with coaching as far as the way you're approaching players and just running a team?
Yeah. Well, my philosophy was to coach them up, not down. And I think maybe at this point I can share with you the story of how Coach 'em Up came about for me. I had left Boise State and had become the associate head coach at the University of Missouri, defensive coordinator, and I was there for just a couple of weeks. And a young man came to my door, and he introduced himself and said I probably wouldn't remember him, and I didn't. But he said that he and I had coached together, or he had played as a walk-on player at Washington 10 years ago, and I was one of the assistant coaches. Mm-hmm. He said one day at practice he was really messing up. He was fumbling and stumbling and falling down, and the young coach that was working with him was getting upset and started yelling at him, screaming at him, cursing at him, embarrassing him in front of his teammates. And so he said that I came over, got between the two of them. The player thought that I would turn to him and correct him. But I turned to the young coach and I said 5 words that had made such an impression on this young player. Well, I didn't remember it at all. So I said, well, what were those 5 words? And he said the 5 words were coach 'em up, not down. And he said he took that and became a pastor in the state of Missouri. He had driven over an hour to come and tell me the story and to thank me for it. And I thought, wow, that's powerful. So I think the idea of coaching people up, not just in football, but in business, in the family, coach them up, give them encouragement, not discouragement. Don't beat them down. I think that was my philosophy. And I learned that from Don James one year when I was at Washington.
That's awesome. In real life, I manage a team of 23 people, and I try to do the same thing. As you said, I didn't realize what I was doing as far as the phrase goes, but I would say I do the same thing because I've worked for people that manage by, coached or managed by fear and just an iron fist. And I thought to myself, I never want to be that if I get to that point. I try to my people. Sometimes you've got to obviously you've got to sometimes take a little bit tougher stand, but
well, coaching by fear, that may last for a short period of time, but the key to encouragement and the key to most everything we do, it comes from within, and I think that's the key. The will to win comes from within. And we've got to motivate ourselves at times, and we can teach players and people that this is so important. And got to tell you a quick story about Lou Holtz, the great Lou Holtz, about motivation. So one year when he was a coach at William and Mary, they were playing Oklahoma, and of course it was a big mismatch. And all of a sudden the doors to the William and Mary locker room burst open, and the players are running, sprinting as fast as they can go to the other sideline and diving for the sideline. And then Coach Holtz trots out, and the TV people are so impressed. They say, Coach Holtz, what in the world did you say to get these guys so fired up? And he said, well, it was simple. He said, men, today we're playing Oklahoma. They're big, they're nasty, they want to knock your heads off, and the last 11 guys out there are going to start the game. Well, that's motivation by fear. And it's a good story, but it doesn't last that long. You gotta build that from within and into people.
Yeah. Before I move on real quick and back to your coaching career a little bit, one of my regulars, Rick Sherlock, mentions we talked about sports and how it teaches things, but it also builds relationships that last. He's got friends from 50 years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
In high school and semi-pro. Even as a kind of inside joke, I guess, but it does build those types of relationships.
That is so true. Absolutely so true.
Just the fact that Nick Saban has written a foreword to your book here 50 years later, I guess, is a testament to that, right?
Yeah. I think you build the relationships with the players you play with, and also the coaches you coach with, and your lifetime friends, and you don't lose that connection. And we've flown down to my wife and I to Alabama and gone to a game, and tell you a story about Nick. We flew down for the Tennessee game one year, and I had called ahead of time to see if we could see Nick before the game sometime. And I expected, well, maybe on Friday he'd have a few minutes. But they called back and said, no, I want to see you on Saturday, game day at noon. The game was in the evening. But he was so gracious. We went in and saw him and took pictures and autographs. And then they gave us a tour of the Alabama facilities. And so, here's Nick on game day and going out of his way to greet us and make us feel comfortable. Those are the lessons you learn in coaching and playing.
Yeah, and there's a different side to every. People see the public Nick Saban, right? I'm a big Patriot fan, lifelong Patriot fan, and Bill Belichick that we see day to day in press conferences, not giving answers and being, just Bill Belichick is not the guy he is in real life anymore than Nick Saban is.
No, I believe there's two qualities that are so true of great coaches. Bear Bryant, Don James, Nick Saban, all fall into this category. And the two qualities are, number one, strength, and number two, warmth. And I think those two things together help make a really good coach.
Very good point. Let's get back to Boise State for a little bit. So your career there last 6 seasons, you have some success there. You go to, and I want to talk about this one when we get to talking about today's game a little bit. You went to the one AA playoffs more than 1 year, and actually got to the semifinals. Suffered a heartbreaking loss in the semifinals, I think, in triple overtime.
Yeah.
And the schools that I was looking at, Coach, in that league, well, I should say in those playoff matchups, I think everybody you played except Youngstown State is now in the FBS. Correct? Am I accurate?
Yes. Yeah, and including Boise State. Yeah,
including Boise State. Did you see when you were there? Was the trajectory of this school always to get to that level, 1A level?
Yes. When I was recruited, they made it very clear. The president, the athletic director, made it very clear that this is where we want to go. But you got to, walk before you can run. And so we were able to lay down some stepping stones that helped get us there. Two of the challenges I had were academics. We had to get players in line with going to school, going to class. And that was huge. The other one was character issues. We had some guys that were out and about all the time, and we needed to rein them in, and then started recruiting quality people. So, yeah.
I don't want to offend the people in Idaho. That was just a little quick joke about that.
Oh, yeah.
In trouble in Idaho.
Yeah. Well, we recruited a lot in California and Seattle and Portland and Denver. My philosophy was to recruit within an hour flight of Boise State, so the parents could come in and the family, and we had a lot of success with that.
Was your vision to be there for that transition? Would you have hoped to have been there for that?
Well, I think in the beginning, yes, and I think as we went along, we did not have the budget or the facilities that obviously they have now. And so I had to hire guys on a shoestring sometimes, and I had to piece together a package for Jim Zorn, who became my quarterback coach. And but yeah, we had to be really creative because we did not have the budget or the facilities to do what we wanted to do at that time. But we were building toward that.
Yeah. So as you went through your years, there's some players, and we know some players obviously since they went to Division I, and you coached some great players. We had a question here a while back. I didn't pop up, but Dave Gatt was asking who the best players you ever coached. Obviously, we talked about Jack Lambert and we talked about Warren Moon. But there's some other guys that we may not think about that were just great players, but maybe don't come to the top of our minds.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There were a lot of really, really good players. At Washington, we had some linebackers that, man, these guys would set their hair on fire and rip their ankles and go out and cause a wreck. You know, we had Michael Jackson, middle linebacker, and you know, besides Warren Moon, Joe Steele was a terrific tailback for us. And yeah, there's a lot of guys went on into the NFL. Two of the guys I recruited, Ron Milas and Ray Horton, who both coached in the NFL. You know, a lot of really good players. And yeah, it was the key was not just one or two guys. The key was you know, having a bunch of them that could really play together and make things happen. And yeah, we were very fortunate to bring in some quality guys.
Which I'm sure was harder at Boise State to get that level of.
Yeah. We were kind of recruiting the you know, the guys on the edge between the Pac-10 at time and our conference, the Big Sky. Once in a while, we'd score a big win. Guys that had been recruited by big Pac-10 schools, but yeah, we had to kind of take the edge players and develop them and hope that worked out.
Were there any players that did make the NFL, or you thought maybe had a shot at making the NFL while you were at Boise?
Yeah, we had a defensive lineman. His name is escaping me right now, but he played like 12 years in the NFL, and was really a good player. There was other players that had tryouts and didn't make it, but yeah, we had a few players that went on and like I say, one that played for 12 years in the NFL. So yeah, you just recruit and you recruit and you recruit again, and you have a mentality that recruiting is not an event; it's a lifestyle. Yeah. And that's how we went about our business.
As you go through your career there, Coach, and your career ends there as a head coach, did you want to continue as a head coach, and was that still a dream for you?
Well, you know, it was always a dream, but you know, having been the number 2 guy with Don James all those years, and then becoming the head coach at Boise State, I mean, both of them were great positions. And then when I went to Missouri as the associate head coach and defensive coordinator, I really enjoyed that role because you're closer to the players. You know, you're in there with them every day, you're coaching them, and you're mingling with them. And so, yeah, the head coach is the one, of course, that gets all the acclaim or all the blame, one of the two.
Oh, right.
But to be able to be with the players on the field, in the drills, and day after day, I mean, that is really the thrust of coaching. And the head coach is more like the CEO, making sure that all the parts are working and observing all the different different positions that they have, but he's the one that makes it come together.
After Boise State, you move on to Missouri. I learned how to say the name correctly.
Missouri. Yeah, depends on which part of the state.
I learned that from Mark Littell, former Royals closer. Missouri, so I try to do it correctly for Mark. You move on there for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And after that time, Coach, I mean, what caused you to, or what brought you to the point where you said, I don't want to coach anymore. I'm done with this type of.
Yeah. Well, after 30 years, you know, the last year, my wife and I talked about it, and I just said, you know, I think my time in coaching football is about up. I don't want to quit coaching. I'd like to try my skill set into the business world. And so after 30 years, I resigned my position at Missouri. And a friend of mine, a college teammate of mine, encouraged me to come down to Phoenix and work for their company, and they paid all our expenses and gave us a great package. And so we decided that our 30 years of coaching were great, but it was time to move on and see if we could take what we'd learned and the skill set that we had and move into the business world. And well, that's when Aflac also entered the picture, and they were looking for people that were team builders, recruiters, team builders, coaches. And I met a gentleman one day in an airport, and he explained to me that what they did and what they were looking for. And so sooner than later, why I was hired by Aflac, the first true recruiting coordinator for Aflac in the country, and recruited all over the country. And it was a great career for me.
I want to switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk about some of the things that are, top of mind in college football today. There's so much going on. With the NIL. I mean, let me start with two things. Let me start with a playoff, because this struck me. You had experience with a real playoff or not Division II, but the 1AA.
Right.
And everybody but 1A plays a real playoff system.
Yep.
Division one, the top division. What are your thoughts on expanding the playoff to 12? Or I think they should go to 16 myself. But what are your thoughts on this whole process?
Well, I think keeping more teams in the picture is healthy. I think it gives players, coaches more excitement, more possibilities. I think the fans love it. So yeah, I'm all for it. I think it's got to be organized properly and conducted properly and fairly, and that's always going to be the issue. There's always somebody going to be left out. But I think the more the better, for sure.
I had somebody tell me when I did a vlog about this, and they go, "Well, it'll make the regular season less and less important." And I don't think it will. The realignment just destroys the smaller conferences. Because my vision would have been, I actually had a guy who's going to sue me because I guess he came up with this idea and nobody else has ever talked about it for the last 20 years. Have a real 16-team playoff. And all the conferences, their winners get in, and you got 4 buys. It would make every game more important in the regular season.
Yeah, you play the regular season to get into the postseason. So you got to be on your game during the regular season, or you're never going to get to the postseason.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good segue. Is with everything that's going on with realignment, is that statement going to get watered down though? And maybe I'm wrong and you're wrong about the regular season. If we have these super conferences, and that's all we have, right, is 5 super conferences, and all 12 teams are going to come from there. Is it going to Well, first of all, what do you think about realignment, and will it water down the regular season if that comes into play?
Well, society demands big winners. They want to see it. And the other leagues, the other conferences outside of the big 5 conferences, they're going to suffer some because they aren't going to get the exposure. They're not going to get as much TV revenue. But I think that society demands, we want to see the best. We want to build the best. We want to be the best. Yeah. And because of that factor, they're going to recruit the best. And then the other conferences and leagues are going to have to make do with what's left.
Yeah. I mean, and again, I get to be a little old school. I'm getting to that age where I'm yelling at kids to get off my front lawn, But and we're never going backwards. I get that, but college football, in my mind, and this will sound a little, I don't not what's the word I'm looking for? Hypocritical, I guess, because I'm going on both sides. I think college football is a regional sport that has great national interest, but the regional aspect, because all these conferences, I mean, look at the Big 12 now. They're going to have teams in Florida. They're going to have teams in West Virginia. They're going to have teams in Ohio. I mean, they cover 2/3 of the country, and the SEC kind of get into the same place.
Yeah.
And you lose those regional ties a little bit. I mean, do you think you don't think that's going to hurt the game in general?
No, it won't hurt the game. I don't believe, but people are going to root their teams on. But the the best teams in the country are going to reap the benefits, so to speak, and that's never going to change. They're always striving to be the best and recruit the best and have the best crowds and the best TV possibilities. And TV controls so much of college football today. They name the day you're going to play, the time you're going to play, and sometimes these games that start at 8:00 at night are just, it's tough. I mean, people are dropping out because they can't do it. They've got young kids and trying to go to a football game that gets over at midnight. I like games that start and end in the same day.
I'm kind of that way myself. Yes.
Yeah. One thing I do want to mention, Keith, before we sign off.
So go ahead.
This issue of paying players.
Well, I was going there next, so thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I really don't like it. I mean, college football should be an amateur sport. And when you start paying certain players, maybe a few, one or two or three on a team, what about the rest of the guys? How are they going to feel? I mean, it really, I think, causes some division. I just don't like it. My approach would be, if they're going to do something, do it for all the players, the scholarship players. In other words, if they're getting so much right now, why not just increase that a bit for everybody and try to make it work that way? And that would be my approach to it. But I just don't like paying, this guy or that guy and then not the rest of the guys. I think it creates division.
Yeah, I've had a hard time. I've been on both sides of this issue, and that's not like me, because I really come down usually very opinionated on one side or the other. I mean, I get the fact that the NCAA has made billions of dollars off these kids' backs, but they're getting an education supposedly. But I see such a slippery slope here, Coach, where, I mean, one of the rules is you can't use it as a recruiting enticement. Well, it's going to happen. How can it not happen?
Yeah. And then what happens is, it's already happened. Players start leaving high school because they want to get to college so they can get paid.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just not right. I mean, let's keep amateur sports the way it should be. When you start paying players, now it becomes a semi-professional thing. But I understand the money that's made off of them, but why not increase more for every player that's on a team, that's on scholarship? And the walk-ons obviously have to earn a scholarship to get in on the deal. Yeah. But if you increase what the players get, all of them, why, I think that keeps everybody happy and there's no division.
Yeah, and again, you mentioned the high school players. We've already got at least one example. A kid who's committed to Ohio State for next year's got $1 million NIL deal, and he's sitting out his high school season. Well, that doesn't help his development any, for sure, as a player.
No.
Poor person.
Yeah, and then you're hurting the high school program because they're leaving now, and it's just like I say, keep amateur sports at the amateur level, and they can get to the pros soon enough.
Yeah. Before I jump back to the book, and I got a couple questions that might be related to that that I want to from the audience, but I want to talk real quick about the game and the way the game is played today. It's changed so much. It has, just since 1997 when you last coached, not to mention back to 1971 or before that.
Right.
Assistant. I mean, when you're coaching at Colorado, they didn't have these wide open offenses that they have today. Now, Washington, if I remember correctly, ran pretty much a pro style offense at that point. Right?
Yep, we did.
And maybe we're one of the forebears of the game we're watching today. I mean, do you think it's better football today than the option what we watched in the Big 8, for instance, with Oklahoma and Nebraska for years?
Well, every team has its style and its philosophy, and there's a lot of different ways to be successful. Just like in coaching, there's different ways to be successful too. But you gotta take the talent, number one. What do you have for talent, and what offense is going to be the best for that talent group? What defense is going to be the best? You got to match that to the players so that they can succeed. And the old option stuff in the Big 8 at the time, and I coached in the Big 8 at two different schools, Missouri and Colorado.
Yeah.
You know, that there was success there. And of course, at Washington, we opened it up and we had a pro style offense. And our quarterbacks, we had like 4 quarterbacks in a row that went on to the NFL. Chris Chandler and of course Warren Moon and Tom Flick, and that we had a lot of success in that pro style offense. But again, you gotta tailor it to the talent that you have.
Yeah, most of it, if I remember right, the Pac-10, probably most of that league was playing a pro style offense at that
Started
point.
developing. Yep. It started to develop. Absolutely.
Yeah, so maybe that's why it's called the West Coast offense, because you guys were the forebearers of it, and it just moved through the country and finally reached some of those other destinations. Because very few teams playing the style of football we just talked about with the Big 8 today. Some of them do because they have to be competitive, right? Army and Navy.
Right. Yeah, they don't get the big linemen and all. But back to the West Coast. Well, that Bill Walsh was really one of the key guys there too, as he developed that Stanford program and that style of offense. And so it was exciting too for the fans. They'd come out and watch because they knew they were going to throw the ball and there'd be excitement, not just 3 yards in a cloud of dust like the Woody Hayes era.
I've got an interesting. I am going to go to the book right after this. I do have an interesting question from Dave Gayette. He wants to know if an NFL team approached you about coaching today, would you consider returning to the sidelines?
Well, I had opportunities to coach in the NFL. Jim Morris Sr. was a good friend of mine. We coached together at Washington and Colorado, and he was a real mentor for me in the early years. And of course, when he left college coaching, became a head coach first in the USFL, and then in the NFL with the Saints. Why, there were some opportunities there, but I always felt that I wanted to stay close to the educational aspect of the game. Pro sports is all about money, and so here you are as a coach, and you're coaching players that make 10 times what you do, and and things happen day by day. I mean, a player could be there today and gone tomorrow, and I just felt like if I wanted to stay in coaching, I wanted to stay where the educational part of it and the influence that you had on players could make a real difference.
Well, let's switch gears back to the book. I know we've gone back and forth a little bit, which was my plan today, and I want to talk more about the book and the inspiration for writing it and just whatever you'd like to add about the book. We do have a question here that I'll put up that is kind of related to the book and things we've been talking about. How much did the way kids were raised and their parents behave go into you getting out of coaching? I guess that's interesting.
Well, the game changed in some senses. These different rules came into play, and you hated to lose what we had. I thought the way that the game was played and the rules that we had were good. They were workable. Everybody understood them, and then things started to change and open up and do this and do that. But I think 30 years in coaching, it's a long time, and coaching really is a young man's game. But in my case, why I wanted to have some time to do what I did in the business world. I wanted to see if that would work, if that made a difference in the business world. And so we made the switch after 30 years. You get kind of tired and worn down. A lot of coaches, the recruiting becomes a tremendous grind. And if you're 55 years old or whatever it is, and you're out there on the recruiting trail day after day, night after night, chasing kids, and then all of a sudden these cell phones come along, and then there's texting, and it's a 24/7 deal. And after a while, you just say, we've had a great career, we loved it, but maybe it's time to move on and do something else. Well,
you did it very well, I think, from what I can tell after your coaching career, and it's all led up to this book, which I believe I thought when we talked originally it might not be out, but I saw I could buy it, I believe, on Amazon.
It's out on Amazon right now. It came out yesterday.
Okay, good. It's by Aloha Publications, I believe I'm saying that right.
Yes, Aloha, yep.
And you had co-written it with Heather Godier.
Heather Getter.
Getter? Okay, Getter.
Yep.
And Nick Saban, as I said earlier, did the forward. So tell us a little bit more about the book, Skip, and
Yeah.
what.
Yeah. Well, the inspiration to do the book, the publisher, the key person at Aloha Publishing, Mariana Young, had been after me for, well, almost 20 years, ever since I came to Boise State to do the book. And I just didn't have the time. I thought maybe there would become a time, but I was so busy and doing things even in the business world. And I speak a lot too. I do a lot of business, speaking to business groups all over the country. I have in the past. And so the timing wasn't right. But when the pandemic hit, you couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't really do anything.
Right.
So it was a perfect time, and I got together with Mariana, and I said, "Well, let's do this thing. It's time to do it." So we set sail, and it took us about a year, almost a year, to get everything together and the way we wanted it, and then to get it published. And now it's out on Amazon, and yeah. But it's a story about. It's my life story from a young boy to all the way through coaching, all the way through the business stuff, and it's about the power of influence and how that and encouragement changes lives. And it's a great read, I think, for parents. I think it's a great read for business people, and obviously for coaches and athletes. So my hope was that we can encourage more people in leadership roles, especially to influence and encourage the people they're coaching and working with.
Yeah, I think the comment you just made kind of goes back to Rick's question earlier about the parents and the influence that they have on their kids and the way they behave. And I had Pat Combs on, former major pitcher, wrote a book similar, an inspiration, motivational book kind of, and talking about how the parents don't understand the influence that they have on their kids.
Absolutely.
And not how they behave on the field, but how they'll behave in life later.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. Let's say influence and encouragement changes lives, and it's not the coach's job, totally to do that. The parents play a big role in this whole thing, and they need to step up and assume their role in the picture too, and be an encouragement. I've got some grandkids, and I go to their games, and I see these parents that are going crazy. They think the kids are in the NFL or something. That's just not how it is. They got to bring them along step by step.
I've seen this phrase over and over again, and I really don't know who to attribute it to. I wish I do, because I've seen it with attributed to a bunch of people on Facebook, and you never know if the quote's really theirs or not. But and I'm paraphrasing that uncoachable kids become unemployable adults, and I really do believe that that's the case, and it's getting worse and worse today. Yeah. There's no question about that. And in the foreword that Nick Saban writes in the book, why he makes mention of the fact that we learned from the best, from Don James, and about coaching football, but we learned a lot more than just that. We learned how to build men, and not just good football players. And we had a program, we had an academic program, we had a kind of mentoring program. I can't say enough about mentoring. That's what this book is all about too, how mentors matter greatly. And we need to all kind of assume that role, whether we're parents, coaches, teachers, business people, whatever. Well, I can tell you, as I mentioned before, Coach, in my role in life, I'll be reading this book because these are the types of books I like to read to make myself better in my job and dealing with my people. And it helps me deal with some of the ones that are a bit uncoachable, right? And help them. I don't want to just get rid of them. I want to make them coachable, So that's right. Yeah, one quick story. I had a young player I recruited out of Texas, Willis Ray Mackey. He was one of the best running backs, and we beat Texas and Oklahoma on him. He came in and scored the winning touchdown against Texas in the Sun Bowl for us in his freshman year. But I got his grades after the first semester, and I called him in. I said, Willis Ray, I'm looking at your grades here, and if you don't pick it up, you're going to be in the oil business. And he says, oil business? I said, yeah, you're going to be pumping gas at 7-Eleven.
Well, Willis Ray went on to become a superintendent of schools in a school district in Texas. So, yeah, we can make a difference in the lives of people if we approach it, the right way.
Great story there. And Coach, I do believe over the years that you've been in coaching and in your mentoring in the business world. I think you've probably touched a lot of people and turned people around like you did with the story you just told. Yeah. So I want to thank you for that.
There's a lot of stories. Yeah, a lot of stories in the book about that stuff. Yeah.
That's excellent. I want to thank you for that. You've touched a lot of lives, and I'm glad I got to get my audience introduced to Skip Hall today. You've been a great guest. Hope to have you on again, maybe, as I mentioned, on the College Football Huddle show one night, and we can continue to promote the book as I promised Marianne I would do, and I'm promising you now that I will do as well.
Well, that's great, Keith, and I've sure enjoyed it as well. Thank you.
It's been awesome. You have a great weekend, Skip. Thanks for coming on.
You bet. You too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So there we go. So my guest, Skip Hall, what a great inspirational, I think it's an inspirational just having the conversation. I'm looking forward to reading the whole book. Please, guys, get to Amazon, read the book, or buy the book. Actually, that's the best thing to do for the publishers and Skip is buy the book, and then read it and apply it. If you're a parent, apply the lessons that you'll find in here. If you're a coach, apply the lessons you'll find in here. If you're a manager of people like me, apply the lessons. If you're a person who's being managed, understand the challenges that are out there and the way you can change. We're not stuck in the behavior that we have and the patterns that we've set up for ourselves. So whether it's this book or other books, do that. So I want to thank Skip Hall for coming on today. Guys, I'll be on Sunday with my Stream of Consciousness show. Mark Mancini from Mancini Media will join us in the 10:30 segment, as he does every week. Next week, my guest, by the way, should be Hall of Famer Ed White, former Minnesota Viking and San Diego Charger. Ed White, offensive lineman, no less a NFL star than Dan Fouts says Ed White should be in the Hall of Fame. And he had a great career, a long career with the Vikings, went to 4 Super Bowls with the Vikings. And I believe he's one of the few guys on that team that went to all 4. So looking forward to having Ed White next week, guys. Any last comments? Oh, I got a couple here. Hang on, before I sign off, I will address them. Great stuff. All right. Glad you're happy, Rick. I know you had some good questions, good stuff. You too, Dave. Thanks for coming in. I want to thank, Dave, as I mentioned, Ed White will be the guest next week. So I answered your question. I want to thank Dave. I want to thank my dad for being here. He's always here. King Washington 21. I didn't get into your question, King, if you're still here, because we weren't talking about the NFL, but tune in Sunday, because I guarantee you we'll be talking about that Washington and New York game. So if you're still here, I hope you do so. Again, Keith Engel for TGI Sports Talk right here on Northeast Streaming Sports Network. You have a great weekend. I think it's going to be a good one here in the Northeast. I hope it is where you are as well. Keith Engel for TGI Sports Talk. I will catch you on the other side. Bye-bye.
This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.